When I started with CanePortratiture, I was invited to do this piece in Queens, New York, which is home to the largest community of diasporic Guyanese people, most of whom are Indo-Caribbean. These are the descendants of indentured workers that came from India. So when I did this project, it's linked to a photograph I have of my parents, of them going to the studio, and I have this beautiful photograph of them from around the time I was conceived. It was a really common experience that people from villages like the one I grew up in would get dressed up and go to the city on a weekend day and take a studio photograph. Most of the time, the backdrops for those photos were Big Ben, the Eiffel Tower, Swiss Alps. And, these were places that not many people would have had the chance to go to, but people dream about in the way I idealize. This is a kind of fancy gala that this event happened. And I wanted to switch it. I wanted to say, what brought us here is the cane field. And that's okay. We can come, it was a brutal experience. It's an experience that not many people want to talk about and acknowledge. It's very common nowadays for people to talk about their families as exceptions. Like you go to Trinidad or Guyana and people say, oh yes, but we weren't cane cutters. But it's because there was so much shame involved and so much about working out the relationships of that community to other communities, because here were people working under the conditions that freed former slaves would not work under. So the conditions were like slavery, with the important distinction that people were paid a wage, and it was for a limited time. But the habitat, the shacks, this is not so long ago, a century ago. So for me, there's a lot of shame that's carried. I did this once, and I had a young Guyanese man who grew up in southern Ontario, and he didn't want to take the picture in front. He said, I've been trying to get away from my life from that. And I thought, but he was born here. He is so far removed from it, and still he carries. Yeah. So I wanted to say, you know what, this is what happened, and it's okay. And of course, when, people loved people would walk in and they felt like, oh, they remember the studio experience, and they have pictures like this in their family albums, and they thought, oh, how weird to have sugarcane. So when I started this project, I thought it was about the community and sort of challenging how we take up that history. Now this is now 3, almost 4 years later, I realize this project is just about me feeling homeless. Because where I grew up in Trinidad is a small rural village, and our house just around it, when first few years of my life, all you could see was sugarcane. There were a couple of little houses down the road, but across you sat on our balcony, and all you could see is just fields of sugarcane. And that place is, I spent the first 14 years of my life there, and since then have barely spent. I haven't spent more than a couple of years in any one place at a time. So I was like, oh, this is me in feeling heartbroken and alone, and a lot of the decisions about where I ended up had to do with that relationship. So I thought, I was like, oh God, this is me trying to find home.